cut that and cut that.
Started our recording.
There we go. All right.
Yeah.
So what was your first question?
Why don't you just start off by telling us sort of who you are and how you relate to the church world?
All right. I am Cindy Christie Brooks. I am a candidate for ordination in the United Church of Canada. I serve as the minister at Deer Park United Church, full-time, solo. And I also serve as the minister for Calvary Queer Church. So I do very traditional, somewhat conservative congregational work. And then I do work where if we're talking about tables, where there aren't even tables yet. So I run that gamut, since we are going to talk about tables. One of my contexts that I work in, they own their own tables. Their tables have been their own for many years. There's a sense of ownership of those tables, entitlement. There is a real sense of wanting to share those tables as well. But and then my other context is, we're just trying to build a table. We're just trying to figure out how to build that table. So that's who I am. Queer. Sorry, yeah, queer. I identify. I am cisgender, white, lesbian, and I have a couple of offspring. One of them is a gay man. So I'm also the parent of a queer person, and of course, I shouldn't forget my other child, simply because he's straight. I am also the parent of a straight child. But I navigate a lot of, I have a lot of intersectionalities in my life, in terms of whether or not there are places at the table for me, because I have always been a churchgoer. And so I've grown up in church, young adulthood spent in church, my adult life raised my children in church. And so as a woman, as a queer person, and then as the mother of a queer person.
Very cool.
Definitely room around the table has been an issue. So yeah.
Well, and you were talking about the metaphor of tables in general, and sort of the theme for this Naked Faith and for the next year or so is about flipping tables based on that scripture from Matthew, when Jesus comes into the temple and starts literally flipping tables over, money lenders.
Tables is my favorite, and I like sometimes the four writers each have their own flavor, right? And John's account I really enjoy too. I love the image of Jesus going to the trouble to make a whip out of cords. He doesn't just grab a cord, he puts some effort into it, right? And I love the image of Jesus just enraged. Like, I'm done with you guys. This is enough. And making a statement. And this is not, he doesn't teach on this. He doesn't sit down and quietly chat about this. Jesus loses it.
And that's kind of our first question. What does it mean to flip a table?
To flip a table, I think, means that you see that there is a point. You've been polite. You've been patient. You've been respectful. But the time for that is done. And I think that, and I'll speak from a queer perspective. I get a kick out of National Coming Out Day, because if you are different, and whether you're queer, racialized folks don't have the opportunity to kind of pass the way that sometimes some of us who are othered in other ways do. but even sometimes racialized folks or others, queer folk, whether you are neurodiverse, like there's so many things about us, right? That we have to tell people in order for them to know us.
Right.
That we have to tell them why this doesn't feel safe for me, or this doesn't feel right for me, or just, I want you to know who I am. I come out every day, and every day it's that, do I just tell them and absorb their reaction? Because there will be something, it's imperceptible sometimes, not quite, but you get it. Or do I just sit at the table while they talk, assuming that they know who I am?
Right.
And even though what is going on at the table is either harmful for me or is dismissive of my being and doing, or is just downright rude and exclusive, do I just sit there and quietly go, yeah, today is not the day. Today is not National Coming Out Day for Cindy. I'm just going to be quiet. And I'm going to let that joke go, or I'm going to let that comment go. Flipping tables, it's when it's like, no, this doesn't work anymore. This does not work. And it shifts. Rather, for me, what Christ does when he flips those tables, it's the message, I don't have to change who I am to sit at that table. I shouldn't have to change who I am to sit at the table, or be quiet about who I am to sit at the table. If that table is not a safe place for me, if that table is not an honoring place for me, there's something wrong with the table.
Scrap the whole thing.
Yes. And that's what I love. And that's what flipping tables means for me. It means getting to that point where no more. No, yeah, and I can just imagine Jesus going, I am so tired of talking to these people about this. These people who have put up barriers to the holy. These people who have said, you've got to do this, 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 and this to fit. I'm tired of trying to talk to these people about it. I'm just getting rid of it. I'm just,
right.
And so for me in my own life, that's too, there are times when I can take the time, when I can, explain to someone or have a discussion. And then there are other times when I'm like, you know what? No, this is not okay. And this needs to change.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a place that most of us get to for whatever reason,
Yeah.
Yeah. How's that? Is that?
That's perfect.
Yeah.
The next question, this is something that Andrew and I were discussing when we were figuring out who to talk to for this section of Naked Faith is, we purposely picked out people that we knew had been disenfranchised or had been left out of the tables. And we were wondering what it feels like to be asked to speak on that experience. There's some concern there about tokenism, about asking you to represent a group beyond yourself. And what does it feel like being asked to take on that role?
I don't feel like you're asking me to do the work on this.
Awesome.
Is that what you're asking? Yeah.
Yeah, that was part of our concern.
Yeah. I don't feel like you're asking me to do the work in this particular case. But that's keeping in mind that I've been at this lesbian thing most of my life, and I know, yeah, all my life, and I know who I am, and I'm well supported. Mm-hmm. I'm well supported. I'm well loved. I have had the opportunity to navigate, to navigate that road of coming out every darn day of my life. I know what it is. Mm-hmm. I, like you, though, wonder about about that, right? And so yes, I can go to those tables and start flipping them on good days. There are some days I'm not up to it. There are some days where something is said and I just kind of shrink a little bit, because it's a table I thought I was safe at. It's a table that I thought I was honored at. And something happens where I realize that is not entirely the case, because I live in a human world. Right. But in this case, speaking with you, I don't feel like I'm doing the work for you. I have this sense, I identify as a lesbian, and I also identify as queer. I think we're all a little queer. I think one of the reasons that we have divided ourselves so terribly, and that we've created all these different tables or excluded, is that we're so concerned that people are going to find out how we're different.
Right.
And so we define ourselves in terms of, we define us in terms of other. And so I think most of us have an experience of other, whether it's something like, for me, you can pin on me because of my sexuality, where it's easy to identify, or someone may feel other. They may have something about their identity that no one else even knows, but they do, and they have that sense of otherness. And so when people ask me to do work like this or to talk about this, I like to keep in mind that you're not asking me to do work for you, you're asking me to do work with you.
Right. Well, and that's what we're hoping.
Yeah, if I had the sense this was a token thing, there you go, you're back. I was just saying, I can tell when I'm being asked to do a gay for pay thing, right? And I don't do, and I call people on it right away, right? I'm like, you don't want to speak with me, you want me to speak to you, right? Yes. And I don't speak to people about my experience. I will speak with them. And so so if I felt if I thought you and Andrew were up to a gay for pay thing, I would have shut you down right away. So it didn't feel
I'm going to do everything I can to keep that phrase in our Naked Faith video because it's flawless.
Gay for pay. There you go.
Yeah, it's so good. Well, I think part of what we were hoping to do too is create a space for the viewers of Naked Faith to do the work themselves, by giving them more information and more perspectives than they might normally come into contact with, which is why we wanted the interview style and and
I'll tell you, when I sit down with folks, at those tables, and there are little things that I listen for. The moment somebody says, we don't care if you're gay, man, I'm out of there.
Yeah.
Right? Or there are certain things that I kind of shy away from, and that's, when someone invites me to the table but then says, and we just want you to talk, but we don't care if you're a lesbian, you're invited no matter what. And right then and there, I'm like, no, you should care. And it's an issue I have with a lot of affirming churches statements. There's, they're in, right? They use words like welcome, which imply agency, right? When somebody welcomes me to their table, I'm like, I'm out of here. I don't need to be welcomed. I
can take that space all by myself.
Yes, I don't need you. And I've got my own agency, and I'll take that back. Thank you very much. You can invite me. You can offer to sit with me for my first time there, And the same thing with saying, no matter how you identify, or regardless of who you love. And I'm like, it should matter how I identify. You should want to know Don't say it doesn't matter. You should
Mm-hmm.
want to know. You should want to know what makes my toes tingle, or, or if my toes don't tingle. Like,
Right.
you should want to know that. Don't tell me it doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
Don't, like everything about us, because we are this beautiful weaving, right, of that image of God. We're that beautiful, beautiful reflection of a multiple and diverse God, so expansive that we can't even describe the holy. And we're this beautiful reflection of that.
Mm-hmm.
Don't tell me parts of it don't matter.
Yeah, it's
Don't
almost
tell me.
like washing away, bits and pieces of your identity to make you more palatable to
Oh, it's like, okay,
whatever they're
I'll sit
expecting.
down. I had another clergy person say this to me the other day, and we were talking about we're going to have a formalized relationship, in terms of something that I'm working on. And during the process of getting to know each other, I mentioned the fact that, that I'm a lesbian. And the response was, you did not have to tell me that or disclose that. Oh, you did not have to disclose that,
Mm.
and I was like, oh, and right away, that was a table I did not want to sit down at.
Mm-hmm.
Nor was that a table I wanted to flip, because I'm not willing to do that person's work.
This is
Right?
fair. Oh, and that leads really well into sort of the next question that we have too. You started talking about it a little bit with identifying sort of affirming messages that aren't truly affirming. But what are you seeing right now as tables that need to be flipped in the United Church?
Oh, I
Keeping in
think,
mind, like, we don't have 72 hours to list all of them because I know there's a million.
yeah,
But
structure, 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 structure. I think, and those tables that are in the story of Jesus going into the temple, those tables represent, if you get into do the exegetical work on the passage, those tables represent hundreds and hundreds of years of tradition of
mm-hmm.
how you get to God, right? Those tables are the tables where you buy or change the money to then buy the animals, to then have the animals slaughtered so that there is blood sacrifice, so that you can then approach God. So those tables represent structure and tradition and legacy. And I think that's really
Mm-hmm.
important to know. We need right now, and I love this United Church of ours, and I believe very much in church. We need one another. We are called to live in community. Those of us who are introverts, we don't have to do it all the time. Don't freak. I get you. I need my downtime. But we do need one another. And those tables need to go, because we need church, but church is no longer accessible. I hate it when they say it's, in order to talk to young people or to marginalized people, that we have to change our message. We're not relevant. And I'm like, you know what? This is always relevant. This is a great book. As a queer person, I find myself in this book. I challenge your young folk. You'll find yourself in that book. You will.
Mm-hmm.
It's not relevance that is our church's issue. It is structure. And we need to get rid of it. That literally, and that's kind of, that's apropos, because a table is very much a structure.
Yeah.
And man, Jesus did not leave any room for misinterpretation on that. Down it goes. Down it goes. And we have to be, those of us who are kind of holding the reins for people who are approaching the church in this time, those of us who are already there, we have to be willing to let go. we have to be willing to let go of what we've always done and put our faith that if we put God at the center of it, there will be a table. It's just going to look differently, right? It's just going to look different. And you and I are experiencing that now.
Yeah.
What are we talking over? We're in community, we're speaking, but it's not a table.
Right.
It's the internet, right? I mean, we're doing it. And so church, we've got to let go. We've got to let go of our buildings. I know we still need places, but we've got to let go of how we've always done it. So it is letting go of some of those old structures. That includes also old structures, old grammar. And we don't need to be relevant. The gospel is relevant. We need to be accessible. And accessibility is not just about ramps. I'm not just talking about physical accessibility. I am talking about accessibility for folks who are coming from a world that has changed, and that's what Christ did. Christ came from the streets, went to see how people were approaching God and went, you got to get rid of these hoops, you guys. And so he cleared it, wove that whip, not just a cord, wove that whip. And he cleared it and he raged and said, no, you don't need a mediator to approach the holy. You don't need affirmation from priest or minister or that you are of God. You are of God. You are with God already. And we need to do as Christ did 2,000 years ago, because we've rebuilt all that, right?
Yeah.
So,
and that he Jesus was able to come. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
That he was able to come from a place of anger, to validate that anger that you feel when you're left out of the table, like when you're not given a space, I think is so important. There was a lot of backlash with the Black Lives Matter movement. Like their detractors online were saying, this isn't the right way to protest. This isn't the right way to make change. And Jesus was like, nah.
Now, this is exactly.
Flip tables, whip people, be angry.
Yeah. No, and not just a cord. He took the time. He was going to town on them. He was intentional. He didn't it wasn't a momentary lapse. He was intentional. Like little details like that in scripture, I love. He took the time to make a whip. He had time to talk himself out of that. He didn't.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there are times action. There are times for action. And that's what I love about that too. But yeah, I love the thought of Jesus angry,
Me too. More of that.
Yes. It is a wonderful thing. So that's the table we need to turn over.
I love that. Well, and that kind of, it might be I can't talk anymore. I've lost
That's okay.
It might be paralleled in my next question. So if it's the same answer, that's totally fine. But is there a table that you're currently sitting at right now that needs to be flipped?
Well, I think I just mentioned I found myself at a table that I needed to walk away from. In terms of one that needs to be flipped, yes. Yeah, I would say so, but I'm working with people who are faithfully working as well. We're going to flip it together, which is kind of what a wonderful thing, to stand up and to say, no, I cannot do this, right? I cannot do this. And, and I need it to change. And sometimes if you take that brief moment to say, I can't, it's amazing. You might empower somebody else too, right? You know, you might empower somebody else to say, me neither. And then all of a sudden you've got some help in getting that outdated furniture out of there. And, you know, so that's why action is very important. So is understanding why you're looking at overturning it. And it's about church. You know, for me, it's about this particular table is about church structure and about just how something about language and there's just been some issues in a community that I'm a part of. Oh, just froze again. There's been some issues in a community that I'm a part of around the lack of inclusive and expansive language. And I sat at the table for a while, as did another person, and didn't say anything. And you know, in our meetings, and at first I just kind of went, and then no, I couldn't do it anymore. I spoke up, found out there was somebody else who was just as upset as I was. And so now we're taking the time to, you know, we've talked to the people that at the school, and we're taking the time to take care of it. And so that, as I said, that was pretty good, because at first I thought I was alone, and I was just, I was trying to find the courage to stand up and flip it. And I spoke up and found out there was somebody else that would help me do the heavy lifting. And that was wonderful.
Yeah, it sounds like it's easier to flip a table if you've got someone at another corner.
Yeah, it is, right? It is, yeah.
That was all of the sort of official questions that I had, but is there anything you wanted to sort of add to the list or to the conversation, things that you think it would be important for our group to be thinking about when it comes to this topic?
Yeah, the use of anger, I think, is really something.
Oh no, you're froze.
The use of anger, it should never. Like, I hope I don't sound too in love with Jesus's rage and with his physicality. But I do think it's important. We are human beings. We live in our bodies, and our emotions are, you know, they can become embodied. But I think that if you're in a place where you're feeling like you want to flip some tables, I think it's really important to speak to someone always. And actually, well, I just spoke to that, but I think it's important to speak to folks. And maybe you don't need them to help you, but just so that they know that you're taking on the work. Right. And just so that they can ask you how you're doing in dealing with rage. And sometimes I have found that when I have gone in to flip a table, it turns out I'm flipping like 3 or 4 tables from, you know, 5, 6 years ago, and to not get them confused. And anger is a natural and healthy thing. But like, you know, to be careful in navigating it, offer it to God. You know, I offer my rage and my lamentation to God, not just praise. You know, sometimes the table you flip is your prayer table, or, you know, and sometimes I know I've done that where I've just, how long, God? What are you doing, God? Like, boom, you know. But take it to God for sure, and but also ensure that you have some support if you're going to undertake flipping tables. You know, because working for change can take a lot out of you, and so it's important to make sure you're supported in working for change.
I think that's so important for some of our kids to hear right now. We've got a lot of really well-intentioned young people who can see what the world should be or can be. And yeah, I've definitely seen some burnout from it. because they want to change everything. And I agree, there's so much that needs to change, but self-care and support and a community that understands, they're all necessary.
And don't forget to laugh, because don't forget to laugh. Don't forget to look for those blessings in your life, because even though it gets so heavy sometimes, there are some really awesome things, you know. And again, if I want to personalize it, I don't ever want to get so focused on establishing the place of queer Christians at the table that I forget how much fun it is to be a lesbian, how much fun it is to be queer. Well, oh, I just lost you. I'll say that again. I don't ever want to get so focused on fighting for the place of queer folk at the table that I lose sight of the gift of being queer and how much fun it is to be a lesbian. How, you know, the glorious things about that part of me that interweaves in my being and doing. I don't want to get so caught up in it, in the fight, that I forget the fabulous, right?
Yeah.
Like, and I would advocate to anybody, whatever, you know, wherever they are trying to fight for their place at the table, whatever about them is othered or excluded, don't get so focused on how others are treating you and trying to break through that you forget to celebrate who you are and find the blessing in who you are. And, you know, like, that's so important, you know, like, I mean, is it hard sometimes being a girl? Sure. Is it hard sometimes being a lesbian? Yes. But oh man, the good stuff about it far outweighs the negative, you know, far outweighs. And so that's where I put my focus. I mean, all of this about me, my, you know, who I am, you know, no matter what anybody else says. And yes, I might have to fight for a place at the table. Yes, I might have to correct people on their language. I might have to challenge them on their theology. But when it comes right down, that's how God made me. My God, the Holy knows I'm a lesbian because the Holy made me this way and wants me to celebrate and enjoy that. So yes, I'll take on the fight. I will flip tables. I will weave whips out of cords, but I'm still going to enjoy who I am. And so that's what I would say to, you know, to your folks is enjoying the fight, like enjoying it, you know, but also enjoy those things that you're fighting for. If they're worth fighting for, they're also worth taking time to really live fully into, right? And don't let people take that away from you. Don't let people take away the joy of being you away from you, right? That's God-given, that's yours.
Thank you.